Yes, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jack Farmer, and this is the Evolution of Movies show. But I am not alone. I am here with these two fellas. They're the Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland of the show. Let's hear it for Andy Rossi and James Shippey. James, Andy, how are you guys doing this morning?
Doing great. I'm thrown off. Andrew Garfield and what was it?
Tom Holland.
Yeah, I only know one Spider-Man. His name is Tobey Maguire.
Attaboy. Attaboy. Good answer.
Right, we're still in the tease part of the show, guys. Come on, you're just giving it away. Even though I guess if you look at the headline, you know what it is. But anyways, let's talk about the show. For people who are new to the show, what it is, it's a show where we watch movies and we talk about them book club style, but we call it the Evolution of Movies because we always pick a movie that came out 1 year after the last movie we watched. So we started in 1990, then went to 1991, 92. Now we're in 2002, and that means next week it's 2003. But for now, let's talk about 2002. Let me take you back to a time when movies were trying to leverage intellectual properties to help sell their movies with hits like Scooby-Doo, Resident Evil, and of course, Kung Pao. But we aren't watching any of those. We're watching Spider-Man, a movie IMDb describes as when bitten by a genetically modified spider, a nerdy, shy, and awkward high school student gains spider-like abilities that he eventually must use to fight evil as a superhero, which actually sounds like a terrible movie. And Roger Ebert may agree, as he didn't have anything nice to say about this. The only thing he had close nice to say about it was that the origin story is well told, and the characters will not disappoint anyone who values the original comic books. I love this movie when it came out, and I think people our age still see Tobey Maguire as the Spider-Man. But this was the superhero movie for me that I think really created the template of what these kind of movies would look like. Marvel in particular, with the bright colors, the comedy, the action, and building longer narratives beyond just the one movie. James, Spider-Man 2002, had you seen it before this? And what were your thoughts going into it this time?
Had I seen it before this? No. It's Tom Holland Spider-Man, Andy. MCU. No, yeah. I hadn't seen this one, in a very long time. Because, after, the first three Spider-Man, the Sam Raimi ones, then we get Andrew Garfield 4 or 5 years later. And now we're all kind of entrenched in the MCU with Tom Holland, who's great at it. Let's just call it what it is. He embodies that youthful energy of it. But going back to watch Spider-Man 2002, it was a pleasant surprise. I'll be honest with you. Like, this was that first template, kind of big spectacle, superhero film that we've seen. And if I'm not mistaken, this is probably the first live action Spider-Man film, right? Unless I don't know if there's anything that came out years before, but, Tobey Maguire, it was good seeing him. He was Spider-Man. It was good seeing him with his energy in it, and I thought the movie holds up well. I know that's kind of like a repeated phrase on this show, but sometimes you just don't know how these films are going to hold up. And this one, this is a great film. They knocked it out of the park for this film.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought it aged very well, considering just how competitive the superhero movie genre has become. Andy, you picked this one. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, I agree with James. I think it did age really well. And I do think Tom Holland is a great Spider-Man, but Tobey was the OG. So you got to represent. Yeah, no, I agree with you guys. I think it was a pleasant surprise. I probably haven't seen it. I can't imagine that I went back and watched it after I saw it in the theater. But I remembered a lot of parts. There's a lot of memorable parts in this movie, so it was cool to go back and to see the rest of it. And then I did want to definitely compare it to the new Spider-Man movies, and I thought maybe the stunts or the CGI or whatever would be dated, but it was great. It looked good, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was really kind of thrown off by it. Like I said, I always look at the film reviews and the IMDb reviews. The IMDb review makes it sound just like the cheesiest movie of all time. It's like he uses his spider powers to fight crime. But also, I was surprised Roger Ebert really hated it. He was not into it.
That surprised me too. I'm gonna go and check that out.
I mean, I was looking for some favorable things, and really it was just the origin story was well told. The rest of it, he just buried the whole thing.
Surprising. You know what was great about Roger Ebert? When I was a kid, he was always very favorable about Jean-Claude Van Damme movies. And I was always like, good for you, Roger. So it's funny that favorable about those movies, yet didn't like Spider-Man.
He likes Jean-Claude Van Damme movies. He knows movies really well, apparently. But yeah, his comments don't age well, because it's like I said, I feel like it's still just as good as it was when it came out.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. And like I said, when you watch this, you can still see the fingerprints of it now on every other Marvel movie that's come out. You can see, like I said, sort of the bright colors, the comedy mixed in, still very true to the comic book origins, all these other things that were in there. And just overall, really, really good movie, I thought. But before we get into the movie, before we chat about it and break it down, I want to say thank you to everybody who's watching the show, listening, or all that good stuff. If you could do us a favor, leave a 5-star review, leave a comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Let us know what movies you would like to see broken down and talked about here on the Evolution of Movies. That could give us some fun ideas of what you guys are looking for. But in the meantime, fellas, let's swing into action here. Who am I? Are you sure you want to know? This isn't a happy story. Peter Parker leads us into this story as he almost misses the bus for the school field trip to college. Harry Osborn is dropped off by his science business mogul father, Norman, and who is impressed by how smart Peter Parker is, as opposed to his own son, Harry, who keeps getting kicked out of school. They head to the science lab where they learn about all the kinds of different spiders, and Peter eventually gets that iconic bite that sets the rest of the story in motion. James, this is the setup of the whole movie, and almost to the point that even in the science lab, they're basically just going through all the powers that Spider-Man is about to have. But we also see that he's kind of a nerd, gets picked on, those kind of things. As we enter this world of Spider-Man, what are you thinking of the movie at this point?
Well, I thought what they did masterfully is, since I hadn't seen it in years, you get right off the bat that this guy is someone you're going to root for. He's such an underdog. I mean, everyone's making fun of him on a bus. Even the bus driver is like kind of bullying him. And, it's the scenes you always see in the bullies. He's staring at Mary Jane and someone trips him. He falls on his face. I'm surprised he didn't break his glasses then, And even when he's outside and, we laughed out loud when she waves and he thinks it's to him, but it's to the girls behind him, and it's like, this poor guy,
There's nothing worse. By the way.
There's nothing worse. And I think it's happened to all of us at one point. Like, we think someone saying to us. So, I think it masterfully does that. And I don't know about you guys, but I was actually a little surprised. I didn't know that, like, the spider bite, I didn't remember the spider bite coming so quick in the film.
Yeah.
This movie gets straight to the point. I mean, there's really no wasted scenes or moments these first 10, 15 minutes of the film. And as he just continuously got picked on, you're just like rooting for this guy. So I think that's the great thing about it. And Spider-Man is probably more so than any other comic book character. He's the quintessential everyman, because he's just a young kid from Queens, and he comes from modest beginnings, and he doesn't have money, and there's a morality to him, or things he's having to figure out about himself as a young man. So that's just great.
I thought it was funny too. Oh, sorry, Jack. It made me laugh in the beginning because I agree with everything James was saying. But you do look at Tobey Maguire, and to me, he's a pretty good looking guy, actually. And it just reminded me of like She's All That in the beginning, because it's like they gave him glasses, and it was like the Forrest Gump scene where no one wants to sit with him on the bus, and then like you see how easily he trips over, with nice cameo, Joe Manganiello. From like True Blood and Magic Mike is like the bully. But he trips him. I don't know how you trip so easily. Like, he had no momentum. He was basically like standing still, and he tripped over this foot. But yeah, they make him super dorky, and you're just like, look at this loser. But it's like, once he takes his glasses off a little bit later on, you're like, ooh, hunk.
Now, you mentioned Joe there. I was thinking, by the way, this was before it was a cameo for him. I think this was just a spot for him.
This is like his first movie, I think.
The whole time I was watching him, I was thinking Flash, which was his name in the movie. Flash seemed like he was who Freddie Prinze Jr. was supposed to be in She's All That. Because he kind of looked the same, but he was bigger, and he looked like he'd be able to beat up some bullies putting pubic hair on pizza.
Yeah, no one would mess with him. Yeah.
So I thought that was funny. But I wanted to ask you, Andy, because I feel like this is something you'd be able to speak on. Harry Osborn uses Peter Parker's own lines to get the girl that Peter Parker likes. That has to be breaking the bro code, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I kind of knew it was coming too, because he's like, "Shut up, Peter. That's stupid talk." And then, like, when he had nothing to say to her, I'm like, "It's coming. He's taking those lines."
It breaks the bro code, but at the same time, I kind of get it. I probably do the same.
It's all fair.
Do you guys remember? I didn't remember Harry being in the, essentially he's rich, but he's kind of nerdy too. Or I don't think he's a nerd, but he's rich, but he's not. I thought he was a popular guy in school. I don't know why I remembered it differently. Did you guys think that?
I remembered that way too. So yeah, it was interesting that they picked on him because his dad was going to fire them. What's your dad going to fire us?
I was actually thinking, because they said, yeah, his father will fire your father. I was thinking that's actually kind of scary and badass that they can do that.
My dad will do that.
Yeah, why are you acting like that's funny?
Keep
that's
it
a
up.
very serious situation.
Or that's something he should be ashamed of,
And his dad, Willem Dafoe, I love him so much, but man, is he terrifying. Just I mean, sorry to say, but just looking at him, you're just like, this is a bad mother, just like, as soon as he drops him off at school, you're like, this guy's scary.
He's got that intense eye contact, I think, that just makes him that, even if he's saying something nice, he could say like, "Hey, nice outfit today." I'd say, "I got to get out of here before he
What is he gonna do to me?
This guy's crazy.
It's his cheekbones. It's the way his face is shaped too.
Yeah.
It's like really kind of it's gaunt, but not, it's not like he doesn't get any sleep or anything, but it's just he has a gaunt, badass face.
Yeah. And I think because he's so dramatic, and we'll talk, there's a few moments I want to talk about too. Just the way he moves and everything he does feels so dramatic and big. I love him. He's so good. Everything he's in. Speaking of him, Norman Osborn is showing off his company's new glider, but the military wants the super soldier serum that causes insanity. The scientists don't believe it's ready yet, but to prove it is, Norman takes a dose, and would you believe it? It caused insanity. He kills one of the scientists before waking up on the floor, where his employees say, someone killed this scientist and stole our stuff. Yet no one questions the billionaire weapons developer being passed out on the floor after they say this. Anyways, back at the Parker household, Uncle Ben is complaining about being laid off after 35 years on the job when Peter comes home and goes straight to bed. The next morning, he's totally shredded, which is what I expect to happen every time I diet for one day. In the cafeteria at school, MJ slips and he catches her and her lunch before accidentally throwing someone else's lunch at Flash, where the two duke it out and Peter shows him who's the boss. Peter realizes something big is happening and he runs into the streets of New York in what is a staple of superhero movies, testing out the new powers montage. He climbs walls, jumps, and swings to varying levels of success. Andy, I want to start with you. I talked about William Dafoe being dramatic. I just want to say I love when he took the vial and smashed the glass when he was in there. How are you feeling about the development of old Norman Osborn so far?
I think it's great because it's like simultaneously you're finding out who the hero is and who the villain's going to be. So you got them both like going through their powers. And the Tobey Maguire thing's pretty funny because he wakes up, like you said, he's all ripped up in shape. Does he look down and he's got a big wiener now too? Is that what happens? Because it looks like he looks down. He's like, all right. Or is it
it's
just
an indication? I mean, his abs aren't that low, right? Yeah. I mean, like it does look like he's looking towards the private parts area. Like,
right.
Okay.
Well, everyone knows spiders have huge wieners.
Well, that's what I thought was kind of interesting because I'm like, okay, yeah, he's in shape, and then like his vision's really good now, and then but I'm like, okay, throw that in there too. Why not? Whatever. But yeah, that whole stuff is great. I really like seeing like the Peter Parker, like he's got his powers, he's in high school, how does he use it? And I'm sure any kid watching that was bullied is probably like, you know, cheering him on because that's what they want to do to the bully too. And the fight scene is great because it's not like he just like beats the crap out of Flash. He's like dodging him, and then like I actually laughed out loud when he dodged him and he had that moment to kind of look and be like, huh, there's a punch near my face, and then kind of goes back to the fight. It was just like, it was a very like impressive way to fight. It was cool. It was a cool fight scene.
Yeah, I like, because it's not him just saying, oh, I'm powerful now. You could kind of go with him on that journey of, wow, I'm faster now. Why do I know that these things are happening? I thought it was really cool. Now, James, I want to ask you something. There was something that happened during this whole scene that is a pet peeve of mine in movies, something I don't like. And maybe you can educate me on this and let me know where I'm missing something. And it's a little bit of a spoiler with the rest of the movie, but Uncle Ben got laid off after 35 years. And he talks about how he's getting replaced and he doesn't know how to use computers. That whole scene makes no difference in the whole movie whatsoever. It never comes back again. What the heck?
Well, it might have.
Like, there's never a point where he's like, oh, I'm still out of work trying to make ends meet or anything like that. It's just like this weird thing they added in there. Am I missing something there?
No, you're not. But it's funny you mentioned this, because see, when I was seeing that scene, I'm like, oh, Uncle Ben, he's so avuncular. Like I'm looking at this, and I don't know about you guys. I was like, oh man, I liked Uncle Ben even more this time.
Yes.
Because in like the new iterations, we're not really getting Uncle Ben as much, especially with the Tom Holland one. He's already gone. Because it's not an origin story when we first meet him in Civil War, I believe. You know, I'm going to chalk this up. This might be a theory. There's two things. One, they're giving a little red meat for the older people that are seeing this movie, because that's kind of a timeless thing. As men or people get older and industry changes, where's your place in the world, right? Like, you're not going to be able to it's funny. He was like, oh, computer this, computer that. Well, what am I going to do? And all that stuff.
Learn computers.
Yeah, exactly. But no, not at his age. He's 68, right?
Right.
So, and I know what you mean, because there's not a lot of payoff for that. But it's just giving us a small glimpse of this. The thing I got from it is like, oh, Uncle Ben and Aunt May, these are these older people that have been around. They love each other deeply. They've probably been married for years, and they don't have any children. But maybe in a longer cut, we would have seen them all sit down for lunch or breakfast together, because we never get that, which I thought we did. In the back of my head, I thought we got more time to spend with them.
They're so sweet. They're such a sweet couple. And like, kind of knowing the origin story, we know Uncle Ben, doesn't have a long time to go. And it's just like, I think they just really did that to us. Like, I was really I was already getting emotional, like with that scene, fixing the light bulb. Hey, Peter, you want to paint the wall later? Like, you're just like, oh, this guy's so sweet. They have a nice heart to heart a little later on. Like, you're just like, oh. But what was I really wanted to talk about was like, they were so sweet, yet their next door neighbor, MJ's dad, was a maniac. And I feel like we never really I thought Peter was going to take that guy out at some point, but like, that guy never gets his comeuppance. He's just like a jerk like the whole time. I'm like, why is this guy so mad? MJ seems like super sweet.
If it was the Nolan version, as Peter would have went over there and did something to that guy, that would have been part of the plot of the film.
Oh, for sure.
Right. But what's funny about him too is whenever he was yelling, it seemed like he wasn't even making sense. He was just yelling almost nonsense. Like, he's like, "Where's the paper? I'm trying to drink beer over here. The dish." Like, what are you doing, dude? Like, it's
who
not
goes
like
that nuts over a 12-pack, like, or a 6-pack? Like, this dude's a raging alcohol. Like, I'm surprised MJ didn't leave the house with like a black eye. I mean, I'm not trying to be funny here. Like, this dude sounded unpredictable. I'm shocked that there was no physical. I mean, not that we would see it, not that we saw it, but
it's funny because he was complaining about where's his beer, and I was thinking, you're the one that's supposed to get it. MJ's in high school. What she can't get beer. What do you expect from her? I digress. Yeah, it would have been nice to see him get beat up, but fortunately, MJ was able to just go ride off in a cool convertible and leave poor Peter Parker in the dust. So that's fine. One last thing, though, I wanted to circle back on with the computers and things aging is, and we'll see it a little bit as the movie goes on. this was a sneaky old movie in the sense that you don't feel like you're watching an old movie, but certain things happen throughout the movie that remind you of just how old this movie is, which was tough to watch as someone who's aging, I guess. But we go into the next part, and Peter's web slinging caused him to miss out on some chores, and he does get some time to hear MJ get yelled at before running off the guy in the fancy car. And that makes Peter decide he needs a new car. So he decides to try pro wrestling so he can buy a car instead of helping his recently laid off 70-year-old uncle struggling to keep a roof over his head. In the ring, Bonesaw McGraw doesn't even last 2 minutes with Spider-Man, so the promoter stiffs Peter, and that leads to Peter letting a robber go. That robber later kills Uncle Ben, so Spider-Man goes to kill the robber and emotionally handles murdering someone frighteningly easily. This is what pivots Peter Parker into Spider-Man, and he starts fighting crime. Meanwhile, the military is looking to take their contract away from Oscorp, so the insane Norman Osborn kills all of them. This whole part ends with New Yorkers talking about how great Spider-Man is, which I think has become a regular thing in Spider-Man movies since then. James, this is where we get that really amazing line and kind of moment from Uncle Ben where he's in the car with Peter Parker saying, with great power comes great responsibility. And this is kind of the end of the guidance from Uncle Ben for Peter Parker.
Yeah, I mean, as Andy would say, this movie actually, I would say more so than any other Spider-Man film. I remember more moments from this movie as opposed to any other Spider-Man film. I mean, if you think about iconic moments, and that's what makes it more timeless, I'll be honest, than any of the other ones. We'll see what those are like, almost 20 years old as well. Wow, that sounds crazy.
Yeah.
It's almost 20 years old. But with great power comes great responsibility, and that's kind of the theme throughout the whole film. And the good thing about this film, whenever you sing a good film, when actions happen, there's like a therefore, like this happens, therefore it causes this to happen. And that's great filmmaking, because the whole point was, what really kicks everything off is Peter now wanting to maybe shoot his shot to Mary Jane, but she sees it. She gets in Flash's car, so he needs a car. He's gonna go ahead and try and earn this money. And as you said, he lets the robber get by, kind of to burn the dude that burned him for giving him $100. I mean, I'd be pretty pissed too. $100 out of 3,000. But what does it do? It causes his Uncle Ben to be in a line of fire when this robber's getting away. Hence, this is going to lead him to fight crime. This is a good reason. There's nothing random about like this setup. That's what makes it so great. Yeah, I thought that was pretty remarkable. And like I said, seeing this movie now, this great power comes great responsibility. What other line in film can you remember over the past 20, 25 years that has been used in all sorts, like pop culture and like just in general? Like everyone uses this. You see it in sports shows. You see it in pretty much every line of life. Great power comes great responsibility. Like it's the zeitgeist. It's not aged at all. It never will be.
Right. And it's and to your point, yeah, it's from this movie. I know I think it's been said in other Spider-Man movies. I think it's been it's probably in the comics, but I feel like it's this Uncle Ben saying it. And I don't know if maybe it's a tribute to the actor who played him. Maybe it's because this movie was so big at the time, but what an amazing line. What an amazing moment. I also want to say him looking for the car through the newspaper was one of those moments where I was like, geez, this is an old movie. And I feel old that he's doing that. But Andy, I want to talk to you about a guy who was living the dream in this scene, Bruce Campbell, as pro wrestling, I guess, announcer and ringmaster here. I'm a huge Bruce Campbell fan. I kind of get the feeling you're a fan of the guy.
Oh, absolutely. I got his book. It was a lot of emotional experiences going on here, because that Uncle Ben stuff, they're back and forth, like before he leaves, because eventually this guy's going to reach his demise. So like when they have that heart to heart, you're sad because they get in an argument. And then, of course, once we find out it is Ben, it is a very sad scene. Like, I'm so sad that I'm thinking about it now. But then I'm so excited when I get to see Bruce Campbell and the Macho Man
Randy Savage. Oh my God.
Bonesaw is ready.
What are you gonna do?
Oh my gosh. I forgot all about Bonesaw. So I was very excited when I saw him. And then Bruce Campbell, who I think, because it's Sam Raimi that did all 3 of these Spider-Man movies, I think Bruce Campbell's in all 3 of them. I think he's got like little cameos on each one of them. So and he's great as a ring announcer. And then Tobey Maguire wants to be the human spider or something like that.
So that name sucks, kid. That name sucks. You know,
in the way only Bruce Campbell can say it, though, too. Just in this like, oh, that name sucks. Bruce Campbell, if he wasn't such a successful actor, he had a calling in pro wrestling. I feel like he fit right into that whole scene. A favorite moment of mine was Bonesaw McGraw calling Spider-Man Freak Show, which seemed hilarious. Hey, Freak Show, look in the mirror, fella. But also something that they should take in real wrestling is, I loved how he's walking down to the ring and these women are just berating him the whole way down to the ring. I would love to see that happen and just see these cocky guys come out and just see all of their ego crushed by women just making fun of them the whole way down to the ring. I was thinking somewhere someone's watching this movie and they're going, wait a minute, is that Kyle's mom? Because now it's been 20 years and time's gone on. But again, big things happen in this scene. Obviously, they graduate and they move on from school. But one of the big things, and we talk about how heavy certain moments were, is he has to tell Aunt May, obviously, that Ben passed away, which I thought gave this movie real stakes. And it made think like, now I'm worried about the characters in it now that I know, even though we know Uncle Ben, if you know anything about Spider-Man, isn't going to make it. Just that feeling of them making this a big moment made it feel like, okay, could Harry die? Could MJ die? Could things happen to the characters, which I feel like makes the whole movie itself a little bit bigger.
It was an interesting way to do it too. I'm not that familiar with the comic on how Uncle Ben really does die, but I doubt it's through a pro wrestling payment gone wrong.
I actually believe it is.
Oh, no way. Really?
Yeah.
Well, that makes more sense because I was actually thinking in the movie, I'm like, wow, what a twist for them to be like to throw pro wrestling in there. I mean, I love pro wrestling, so like that was fun, but I was kind of like, that's kind of odd. But yeah, if that's really the way it happened, I think it's a very cool way.
Yeah, I thought, and one more thing I wanted to add personally, and James, if you have anything, you can let me know. But there's 2 more things, actually. One, I like how Ben says, don't pick fights just because you can win them. So Spider-Man goes and picks a fight with every single criminal in New York City in honor of Uncle Ben. And also, Peter is apparently a scientist, photographer, artist, and seamstress, and Spider-Man. I mean, he seems to be able to do anything. He drew that amazing concept art for his outfit. He made his outfit. He again is a photographer. He's a super scientist. This guy's insane. He's crazy. How like
I did think about that. Did I miss something? Like at the end, his suit is like awesome. It's like a perfectly made suit, and I don't think he got any. You didn't look it up on the internet then, so I don't know how he got these skills.
He didn't have Tony Stark to make it for him. Not in this movie, right?
And like, if he had someone else make it for him, there's a famous Spider-Man swinging around fighting crime wearing the exact same suit someone ordered from you 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, it was interesting. Like, speaking of that, just having him. I mean, we all make fun of poor Christian Bale doing his Batman voice, but Toby. It's the same exact voice, Tobey Maguire and Spider-Man. And I thought with Norman and Goblin have pretty much the same voice. So I just thought that was interesting when they were fighting, yelling at each other. I'm like, you guys haven't figured this one out yet? You sound the exact same.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point too, especially because the suit and glider were stolen from Norman Osborn, and the guy that has them has Norman Osborn's voice.
Yeah.
And no one's putting that together.
And they're around each other a lot. Like, if it was like somebody, like if it's one of my cousins I haven't seen in 20 years, I might not recognize his voice that much, but these two are in they're eating dinner together, they're hanging out, they like see each other, at least in this movie, almost every day. They're running into each other.
I'd almost be more offended that you didn't figure it out. It was me at that point. I'd be like if I was fighting, I'd be like, Andy, God, how can you not tell it's me?
It's me. Yeah.
Jack?
I'd be more offended by that than the killing.
No.
Right?
So sorry.
Like, sure, he killed people, but he didn't know who I was. Come on. I'd be the worst superhero. I'd give myself away like right off the bat.
Oh yeah, I'd want
all
those
the credit.
accolades. Yeah, you save the kid and then you just take your mask off. It was me.
Yeah,
every time I'd pull my mask off and I'd like wink, I'd be like, wink, it was me.
Jack.
Don't tell anyone. Speaking of no one saying who it is, at the Daily Bugle, J. Jonah Jameson thinks Spider-Man is a menace, but he sells papers. So Peter Parker decides to make some money taking selfies, just like a social media influencer, but he runs into MJ and finds out her and Harry are dating, because if you can't date the popular guy, at least date the rich guy, right? At Oscorp, they plan on booting Norman and selling the company. So at the World Unity Festival, which sounds terrifying when they say it's being thrown by a weapons company, Green Goblin just kills them all, and we get a quick showdown between him and Spider-Man. But the story here is Spider-Man saves MJ, and now she won't shut up about how incredible he is. Andy, I want to start with you. J. Jonah Jameson, I know that J.K. Rowling's his name, right? The actor?
J.K. Simmons.
Or Simmons. No, J.K. Rowling's the writer, right?
Yeah.
J.K. Simmons.
Getting your J.K.'s mixed up. Your J.K.'s. I know.
JK, lots of J.K.'s. J.K. Simmons. I know he was acting before this, but this really is what set him off, it seems like. This role. He was like born for.
Good. He's so good. I just love watching him. I wish he was in there more. He comes back in these movies too, right? I feel like he's in there. Yeah,
they're actually bringing him back in the new ones, because
that's
this whole Spider-Verse thing. He's at the end of the last one, Far From Home.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, it was great to see him.
Right? No, but he was born for this role. I mean, he's so perfect for it. It's like they built him in a lab for this role.
Yeah, he's perfect. And some good cameos there, because we missed talking about Octavia Spencer's in the wrestling scene, and then Elizabeth Banks is working with J.K. Simmons there. And then Macy Gray, which I thought was a great 2002 kind of. Again,
how old is this movie? So, yeah, and that was where I think we get the first ever Stan Lee cameo. James, I want to ask you, though, this is a big question for you. The Green Goblin killed the board of two major weapon manufacturers and weapon suppliers. Is he the real hero?
And he killed them like Blade style. They like turned into bones.
Yeah, no, he evaporated them. I don't know why. When I saw it this time, I was like, wow, what a way to go.
But I mean, I was thinking like he got rid of like two of the world's biggest arms dealers. He's kind of a bigger hero than the guy that is just playing judge, jury, and executioner on the streets of New York.
Yeah, no, possibly, until he tries to murder MJ, right? Like it's like you're having these things you're having to deal with. I mean, the funny thing is that, look, Willem Dafoe at rest. Willem Dafoe already looks like a madman. Okay,
right.
just when he's just going to get Starbucks coffee.
Yeah,
but now they're turning it up and really making him mad. He's had the serum in him. So I mean, he's always like having roid rage stuff. He's always like, can you imagine? It's like that guy that you either work with or someone you know in school, and you just don't know. They're just gonna flip out any moment. You know, you're always on eggshells. You don't know if they're just gonna, clear the table.
Right?
Or like, kick a trash can. This is another iconic scene, though, because once again, like this whole world unity and Unity Festival or Unity Day, and the irony that Unity Day is being held by these arms dealers. It doesn't make sense to me.
It sounds like a New World Order thing. It doesn't sound like a peaceful thing.
And again, it's like they're like, oh no, Norman's not here. He's not going to be here today. And then some guy comes flying in sounding like an angry Norman. I don't know who that guy is. His stuff was stolen recently. Wasn't him though.
And the night it happened, we found him passed out on his floor.
Couldn't have been him. His scene
with the doctor's hair in his fingers.
His scene in the mirror is so good, though, where he's like talking to himself in the mirror. He does such a great job. Like, just imagine you having to do that scene. You know, you're angry and you're scared of your own self and stuff. It's so he's so good. He's just so good.
That was another dramatic glass shattering moment too, where he throws another glass of something he's drinking. He had a couple of those in this movie.
Yeah.
One thing that rubbed me the wrong way, this is where I start. I had my doubts about MJ before, but this is where it really starts to seep in here. I don't like the fact that she can't tell this is Peter Parker, even though he literally has the same size, the same build, the voice. He knows her name, and she's already seen him use the same super athleticism to beat up her past boyfriend. Come on, how self-absorbed is this lady? She doesn't even realize who this dude is. To Andy, to your point from earlier.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. You would think she would call him out at some point, and then like I don't think have we gotten to the Spidey kiss yet?
Not yet.
Like she could have just pulled down his mask a little bit more.
As we move on, Green Goblin, he attacks the Daily Bugle, and Spider-Man stops it, but is knocked out and taken to a place to hear about Green Goblin's plan to work together. Spider-Man says no, and while the newspaper tries to paint Spider-Man as the bad guy, he still manages to save MJ again, and that's when they have the iconic upside-down kiss. Later on, there is a fire that was really a trap for Green Goblin to attack Spider-Man, and while he fails, he cuts his arm, which matters because it's the thing that gives away Peter Parker to Norman Osborn, and also Harry and MJ break up at dinner, I think, at this point. Green Goblin goes after Aunt May, and in the hospital, MJ says she thinks she loves Spider-Man, even though she doesn't know anything about him other than that he's a superhero, which works because now that she's not with the popular guy or the rich guy, might as well be with the superhero. Harry sees Peter and MJ having a moment, so he runs to Daddy to tell him, and Green Goblin says he's going to make everything right. Andy, again, to your point, and I'll let you start here because you mentioned the upside down kiss. MJ, she's so self-absorbed that even when Peter Parker is saying the same things to her that he just said as Peter Parker with a wink, wink, nudge, nudge way, and she sees half his face, still doesn't even notice it's Peter, doesn't know what Spider-Man's favorite color is, doesn't know his zodiac sign, but she's like, I'm still in love with him. She's a trollop, I say.
Yeah, she's very smitten very easily. She goes from Flash to James Franco to kind of Toby, and then all in on Spider-Man, and then back to Toby. Yeah, she's a teenage girl. I don't know. She likes, most teenage girls at the time were like, I like Lance Bass. Now I like Joey Fatone. Now I like JC. Well, they probably all like Timberlake. Let's be honest.
But into if you want to get into the psychology of the character, there might be you see how tumultuous her relationship is with her dad, right? He's like this abusive guy, so hence a girl, she's just kind of globbing on to any guy that shows her attention, and all that kind of stuff, or someone that can be her hero, so to speak, right? Flash, the rich guy. Or whatever, the popular kind of bully. And then obviously is Harry, right? Harry Osborn, the rich kid. And then, of course, Spider-Man, the superhero. So who's Peter Parker?
Which, by the way, again, MJ, I'm going after MJ today. I don't have it. I'm wagging my finger at old MJ here.
He's got a mean dad.
But by the way, so Peter Parker is like, yeah, I kind of know Spider-Man. I take photos of him. I'm like his unofficial photographer. And she's like, oh, really? Wow. Do you talk about me? How did you not know this is how he's been paying his bills, how he's been paying rent? That's what he does. You've never asked him. You act like you like Peter Parker. You don't even know what he does for a job. That's all he does. Come on, MJ. What are you doing? Quit thinking about yourself. I have no good things to say. I think that Peter Parker should have been talking to Elizabeth Banks. She seemed nice, had a level head on her.
Anyway. That is true. He kind of is. Isn't he sort of flirty with her? And she just is like, welcome. And then it's like, dude, here you go. Here's your opening.
There you go.
Yeah, you had your chance, dude. Come on.
MJ likes Spider-Man. Because that's
MJ likes everybody.
Yeah.
MJ likes whoever's
right.
If Uncle Ben was still around, she'd probably make a move.
Every time she's like in an elevator and someone gets in, it's like, take my breath away.
I'm in love with Uncle Ben now. Now I'm in love with Norman.
Every person she sees, she's like, she's working at her diner, and every time she drops off a plate, she's like, "Oh, hey there.
What's your name? What's your name? My name's Bonesaw." I'm really into Bonesaw right now.
I think I love Bonesaw.
I would have much preferred to see that film. Bonesaw.
I want to see a day in the life of Bonesaw, just like him living his life. I think that'd be great. I did want to say too about this in that fire scene where he has a quick showdown with Green Goblin. This was another sort of iconic moment where he was dodging the blades that were being thrown at him, and this was a part that I don't think the special effects held up quite as well as some of the other moments. But I remember that being a big moment, like in the trailer, him doing the weird jumps as he was dodging all these things coming at him, and I thought that was cool. And that's all I wanted.
And a nice move by Dafoe as being the old woman up there. That was pretty good.
Oh yeah.
Dude, William Dafoe, he went all in on this movie.
Yeah,
I love how he's still in his outfit, but he's still got the little thing over his head. Like, what are you doing?
Is this where he calls in, or does he say, "Can Spider-Man come out to play"? Is that this part where he calls, where Peter Parker calls MJ? He's like, "Can Spider-Man come out to play?" So
yeah, that happens just after this. Which, by the way, I want to mention. He goes to man. This is just another one of those moments where, again, this is a sneaky old movie because it doesn't look old when you first turn it on. But he's like, Peter Parker has to go check on MJ, and he runs to a payphone.
Yeah.
Which was like, what does he do? Oh my God, that's right. This is a sneaky old movie. They didn't have cell phones. And by the way, also real quick, because he also had to get dropped off the library to do homework. I mean, could you imagine, like, if you don't have information at home, you got to go all the way to the library back then?
Yeah.
Jeez, crazy. Again, it's because this movie doesn't look old. I mean, it's old, but like it's aged well enough that you forget, like, oh man, this is a 20-year-old movie.
It almost seems like it should have had like a thing that said like 2002.
Yeah, like something to remind me so that it doesn't shock me when they do these things sometimes. But to your point, Green Goblin captures MJ and a bunch of kids and makes Spider-Man choose which one to rescue. He rescues both, though, and then beats up Green Goblin to the point that the Green Goblin tries to kill Spider-Man, but only kills himself. Spider-Man delivers the body to Norman's home just in time for Harry to see him do it. And now Harry thinks Spider-Man killed Green Goblin, or killed Norman Osborn in this case. At the funeral, Harry vows vengeance against Spider-Man to Peter Parker. MJ, though, decides that if she can't be with the popular guy, can't be with the rich guy, can't be with the superhero, she would make a move on Peter Parker, the best friend of her ex, while she's at her ex's dad's funeral. Jeez, she's just the worst. Anyway, Peter Parker friend zones her hard, and he says, "I'm Spider-Man" to himself as we're serenaded by the sweet melodic tones of Chad Kroeger from Nickelback to remind us that this was actually 2002. So the whole movie wraps up here, and the very iconic concept in this final fight scene where they started off with having to choose who to save. Do you save the girl or do you save the kids? Something that we saw in Dark Knight as well, where he was given choice. Do you save Rachel or do you save
Harvey Dent?
Harvey Dent, that's right.
Yeah.
Tell us about the whole make a choice superhero stuff.
You know, this stuff is always popular in superhero films, like choose your love or choose these other people because you're a superhero. Like no life is more important than the other, right? And I mean, this is like a trolley of kids, and they literally say like, "Spider-Man, save us! Don't let us die."
Oh God.
So I mean, in the perfect world, he's able to save too. I'm just shocked because it's like, how long is that spider web gonna hold on? Like, it was down to its like last 2 webs for the longest, right? I was just waiting for that thing to break. And I'm like, okay, well, if it does break, can't he just like redo it again? Or is this thing like a rope? But I love how in that movie, it's so, you know, at a certain point when Green Goblin's about to kill Spider-Man, all of a sudden debris starts hitting him from the bridge, and it's like all these, you know, New Yorkers. And in every movie, a New Yorker has to say, "We're New Yorkers. We're New Yorkers. You don't mess with us. You mess with Spider-Man, you mess with us." You know, and then someone's throwing like a slice of pizza at him. You know, someone throws like a jug of water. Who knows who's like walking around at a jug of water unless you're like an athlete on a college campus.
Yeah, Joe Kane would.
Yeah, Joe Kane would, exactly.
And he'd throw a dart at that guy too.
Right, exactly. But I think this is iconic, and obviously, as you say, going into later, the motivations and the obsessions with these characters are very clear, and that's what you want in a film. That's what helps drive a film. So when Norman is like, my main objective is to, you know, get Spider-Man for killing my father, you already know they're laying the groundwork for sequels, you know, because they already know where they're going with this. This is a big IP, as you say. And yes, MJ, yes, she's not reading the temperature of the room. No. I didn't even think of that. I mean, she's at her ex-boyfriend's dad's funeral, and now she's making a move on his homie. Yeah,
the guy says is the only family left. That's who she's gonna go after.
Yeah. And it's funny, like we keep making fun of her for not knowing a Spider-Man, but it's not until that very end where she kisses Peter Parker where she's like, huh, wait a minute.
Real quick, do a handstand.
Yeah.
There was something I want to circle back on, because this is kind of a Dark Knight thing with him making him choose, but there was also another moment, and Andy, I want to go to you on this one. And again, this came out long before the Dark Knight, though. The Green Goblin says earlier on, no matter what you do someday, no matter what you do for the people of New York, eventually they want to see you fail. Eventually they'll grow to hate you, which is almost exactly what was said in the Dark Knight as well, where he says, you either die the hero or you live long enough to become the villain. Again, I guess this is just another sort of thing that so many superhero movies have taken going forward after this.
Yeah, no, very true. And that's exactly kind of what happens in this movie. And what's interesting too, I think, with the Goblin, I didn't remember how he died. I didn't even know he did die in this one. But did you notice, like, he kind of just got hit in like the crotch?
Yeah, I knew you were going to bring that up.
Hits him in the crotch, and he dies quickly. Like,
mercifully, if that's in the crotch.
Yeah. Oh God. That's true. But I was kind of thinking, I'm like, this guy's all jacked up on goblin juice, and he like dies pretty quickly. Like he gets hit in the nuts, which pain. I mean, super painful. And then he's just like, don't tell Harry, dead. And he's just dead right away.
If you get impaled in your crotch by a weapon like that, you would lose your will to live too. I mean, as a man, you're done.
How great would it be if at the funeral, Harry is like, Peter, I vow revenge against Spider-Man. Did you know he stabbed my dad in the dick?
Now I'm going to stab his dick, which I hear is huge.
Which again, though, speaking of self-absorbed people.
And then Peter Parker, I'm sorry, he'd be like, oh, have you? You heard? Like he'd be like, oh, that's
Did you tell MJ by any chance? Because she knows now.
Could you pass that around that Spider-Man
in air quotes?
There's a reason that he wears tights, you know. I was gonna say, it's funny again, everyone's so self-absorbed. Harry, best friends. Hey, Peter, you're family to me, best friends. Also, trying to get to Spider-Man, doesn't even think you seem to know where Spider-Man is all the time to get his photo, because he doesn't even know what Peter Parker does for a living. What a jerk. No one pays attention to what poor Peter Parker's doing all the time. These people, I can't with these people.
But then the ending, you got Nickelback.
I know.
I was laughing so hard after that. I just let the credits run a little bit.
I let the whole thing go.
And I'm like, interesting.
Oh, this one. So, well, you know, it also harkens back, because before you remember, like, these kind of movies, or especially movies from the 90s, early 2000s, there was always a song connected to the film.
Yeah.
Like, and you kind of lost that over the past few years. The last time I remember that being big. The soundtrack was for Black Panther. I mean, that soundtrack is just like amazing with all the Kendrick Lamar stuff. But besides that, that's kind of so old school. And yes, when you hear Chad Kroeger's voice, you're like, oh my God, this is so early 2000s.
Yeah.
I am so high, I can see heaven.
Reminded me of when I worked at the Gap. You know, I was that guy. I was that guy that worked.
Oh man, yeah. What are they doing now? There was another thing. Again, I like to look at the DNA of superhero movies from this. It ends with Peter Parker saying, "I'm Spider-Man," which big Marvel Universe fans may know. The first Marvel Universe ends with Tony Stark saying, "I am Iron Man," and I thought that was kind of an interesting. I don't know if it was intentional, but it was very interesting that they both kind of end the same way with, Peter Parker says it to himself, but they both end with the main character declaring themselves as the hero. And last, I guess, kind of thing in the way the movie was presented, when it started, there was this part where Peter Parker was saying, hey, this isn't a happy tale. It's not if you're looking for a happy story, this isn't it. And I remember when it started, I was like, this is a fun movie. That's kind of a weird way to start it. But now that we're at the end, I realize it is kind of a sad movie. Norman dies. His friend is kind of alienated. He's lost the girl. He's lost his uncle. He's kind of realizing that he's going to live a life of solitude in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Andy, but I was going to say, I totally agree. And as a lot of these superhero films always definitely execute, when you think of Dark Knight and this and other movies, there's a huge price to pay for you to be a hero, right? Because I mean, you have to like keep an anonymity so the people you love, because that's why he's doing it. Once Green Goblin figured out that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, he goes right after the people he loves, and it's really cool in a sense because Spider-Man or Peter Parker recognizes this without someone older telling him. In a lot of these other superhero films, sometimes someone's letting them know, like, oh, you have to be careful because of A, B, and C. But Spider-Man, Peter Parker, this young kid, he's a teenager initially in the comics. He's having to figure all of this out on his own, pretty much. I think it is kind of sad. And it's a touching thing because really a lot of the movie gets kicked off because of his love for Mary Jane. Even him trying to get a car so he can make her see that he's somebody. So it is kind of heartbreaking because that's the love of his life. He finally has her after being come on, would they say 6 years old? That's a long time.
Yeah.
For an unrequited love to finally want to get at you. And you're like, yeah. I don't know what you feel about that, Andy.
I was just thinking of how scary that scene was where Green Goblin goes after Aunt May, like knowing that it's Peter now. It's like, that's like a nightmare. That'd be the part, like if I had kids, I'd probably be like, yeah, maybe don't watch this part because it's terrifying. She's like, his eyes. And speaking of Aunt May, I was just thinking, like, Aunt May in this movie, at least I look at her and I go, oh, that's an older, actress, where I don't know if people today say that's an older actress because isn't Aunt May Marissa Tomei in like the new movies?
It's completely different, and they make it very clear. Even in Civil War, like Tony's like, "That's your aunt."
I think Marvel is smart, and they're like, "We want her for a long time, so we don't want to get an older actress because we don't want to have to replace the older actress if things go south." But speaking of getting older, last question, you guys can kind of wrap up your final thoughts with this. Andy, we'll start with you. The movie started in high school. How much time passed, do you think?
Yeah, well, they definitely graduated high school. In my thought, it was just maybe the summer before they're supposed to go off to college. Is that kind of where it ended? I don't know. I was kind of unclear because she was working at a restaurant now. I don't know.
See, because that's what I thought the first time I watched it. But I think they had Thanksgiving over the course of the movie.
They did, yeah.
And then by the time they were at the funeral, that did not feel like 18-year-old kids. They felt like they were young adults at that point. But I don't know. James, do you have an opinion on how much time you think passed? Because it felt like 5 years. Like when they were in the funeral, it felt like that was like a 5 years after high school feeling.
Yeah, I mean, they've definitely aged considering all the trauma everyone's gone through, right?
Yeah.
But I memean, there is a chance that this all happened like in a 12-month, because the funny thing was when like Harry introduces MJ to Norman, I'm like, well, how long have they been dating that he hasn't met her she hasn't met his father, but also too, we know what kind of person his father is. It's kind of, he's this guy hard to live up to, and there might be some embarrassment because MJ's poor, relatively speaking to Harry. I don't know. I always thought when I first saw this movie, it was like over like a couple of years, but I'm convinced now more than ever, it's probably like within like a year.
That's fair. Well, any final thoughts before we move on to our Kevin Bacon talk?
My final thoughts are, I think I said it all pretty much, but it was great to go back and watch, especially like getting like the whole origin story. And it was very like kind of like a wholesome, like I feel like it's a very family, I think any age can kind of watch this movie because you kind of, and you get the story of Spider-Man, like how did Spider-Man start? And then you get the characters pretty much right in the beginning in that scene. I thought they did a good job of like having you meet everybody right away. And then the Uncle Ben stuff, I think you get the whole origin story, and to have Macho Man Randy Savage in there.
Most importantly,
it's a 4-quadrant movie. As you said, like in most superhero films, especially origin films, we see the template, I think, follow this movie more than anything, because it's more of a modern story. Compared to some of the older superhero films that it came out, like, Superman back in the 70s or 80s. And
even X-Men right before it.
Oh, you're right. X-Men. Yeah, you're right. So,
X-Men was a hit, but it didn't feel, I don't think people copied it. Like this movie felt copied.
Yeah, no, definitely. Because like I said, this is a 4-quadrant film. It's actually something for everybody. I think women like it, children, adults, it's got something for everybody. And it's got it's just good movie. I was shocked, to be honest with you. I thought it would be so dated after seeing all the MCU stuff we've seen now, and even when Andrew Garfield took over, that was kind of like a new breath of fresh air. But yeah, it was great. Yeah,
I really loved it. And Spider-Man is who I think is probably one of the best superheroes of all time for a number of reasons. But I just thought it aged really well. I was really blown away. I was expecting to make fun of a bunch of really bad special effects or things that didn't age well, but I mean, I think if you showed this to someone younger, they would know it's an older movie, but it would still be just as enjoyable today as it was back then. But that said, let's get into the real enjoyable stuff. Let's get into the stuff that everyone's waiting for, and that is 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. Andy Rossi, can you do it this time?
Oh, absolutely. So we got MJ as played by Kirsten Dunst.
I already know how this is going.
Let's see. Go ahead.
Who was in Interview with a Vampire with Brad Pitt, who was in Sleepers.
You got it. Ding, 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 ding.
All roads lead to Sleepers, folks.
All roads lead to Sleepers. I don't know if that's just because that's the easiest one, or if there's just a Brad Pitt obsession that you have here.
Little both.
And Robert De Niro, I guess. But so that was I don't know why, I could just tell. But anyways, so that does it for this week's episode. James, we're going to 2003 next week. What are we watching?
Believe we're watching Old School.
This was one of my all-time favorite comedies. Maybe still is. I'll have to watch it again just to be sure. I've probably seen it 10 times. I love this movie. I had the DVD for a while, which makes me feel old. And this one, I think, is what really set off Will Ferrell's career as a superstar.
This made him a household name for sure. After SNL, he was like the it guy. He was like, it was Jim Carrey for a while, and then like for some reason, like Will Ferrell's like the next big dude in like comedy for a few years.
Yeah, and then after that, it's my pick. We're going to 2004, and we are doing the classic Mean Girls, which I think will be very interesting for us to review. I've seen this movie once a while back, so it'll be fun to revisit.
I've seen it once.
This is one I'm kind of worried because it's kind of like Empire Records, where a lot of people talk about how great it is, and now I'm picking it, and I'm worried we're not going to like it, and I'm going to have a couple of stinkers on my resume here. But
no, you won't. It's a good movie.
This one I'm excited to see. But then, Andy, it's back to your turn for 2005.
Yeah, very similar to Mean Girls. I'm going to go Viggo Mortensen, A History of Violence.
The sequel to Mean Girls.
I'm really excited for History of Violence because I saw that one when it came out on I think on DVD. I rented it right after it was available, knowing almost nothing about it. And I remember liking it, but I don't really remember it.
Yeah.
So it'll be fun to revisit.
Same.
But that does it for us. That's the show, ladies and gentlemen. So before we go, though, Andy, where can the world find John Lund?
World can find me at just Andy Rossi.
And James Shippey.
At JShippy2 on Twitter and at JEShippy2 on Instagram.
And you can find me. I'm Jack Farmer. You can find me at Real Jack Farmer across all social media. Also, shout out to one of our hosts here, Andy Rossi, interviewed by Flobo for New Amsterdam Radio. It'll probably be a couple weeks old by the time this episode comes out, but you can still go back and check it out. It's on Spotify. It lives there forever. It was a fun listen. I recommend everyone give it a listen as well. We'll see you guys next week where we talk about next year. Goodbye.